You see, the early abortions tear the baby's body in pieces, and then the organs aren't saleable, should we say. One of the big reasons we think they are fighting so hard to keep this type of abortion legal is that it delivers an intact body. And now they can dissect this out, and here's the liver, and here's a hind quarter, and here's the thymus gland, and so forth. And of course, if they're born alive and then killed, then they didn't suck the brains out, and they can sell the brains.
On January 22, 1993, within 48 hours of being sworn in, Bill Clinton's first official act as president was to revoke the ban on taxpayer-funded fetal tissue research. Later that year, the Health Revitalization Act made it a felony for abortion clinics to sell pieces of aborted babies to pharmaceuticals and government agencies which were demanding them. However, in typical Washington fashion, an intentional loophole was built into the law, allowing third parties to serve as brokers for the baby parts. Mark Crutcher explains.
There are federal laws which prohibit the sale of human body parts, both fetal and adult. And that's true. But these people who market in unborn children have figured a little loophole around that. When you order a part from them, if you order a baby's left leg, you technically are not paying for the leg. You're paying for the labor to remove the leg. You'll never get one of these people to say, yes, I'll sell you a leg off of a baby, or a heart, or the brain, or the head, or whatever it is that you need to buy for your research. They're never going to say that. What they say is, you reimburse me for the labor. Oh, by the way, I get to set my own labor rates. And we saw, when we did our financial investigation of this thing, that a lot of money's being made on it.
In 1994, the Anatomic Gift Foundation was formed to serve as a harvester for baby parts. AGF staff members would go into abortion clinics such as Planned Parenthood, cut up the aborted babies within minutes after their death, and ship the pieces on ice either by UPS or Federal Express to those agencies who had sent in purchase orders. Former President Clinton's continued support for the process, along with his vetoes overriding the partial birth abortion ban, allowed the baby parts industry to flourish while helping AGF's revenue skyrocket from $180,000 per year to more than $2 million in its first 4 years of operation.
During the last presidential campaign, we were led to believe by some that there really wasn't a lot a president could do about abortion one way or the other. We'll just go back and look at some of the things that Clinton did. He lifted the ban on abortions in military hospitals. He lifted the ban on the so-called family planners for using our tax dollars to hustle for their abortion businesses. He lifted the import alert on RU 486. He appointed 2 hardcore pro-abortion advocates to the Supreme Court and hundreds more to the federal bench. And most importantly, he lifted the ban on the use of our tax dollars for fetal tissue research. That's why we have this trafficking in baby parts that is going on right now.
Our organization is the one that broke the story about there being companies in America that go into abortion clinics and buy the dead bodies of babies who are then chopped up and sold to research companies, medical universities, pharmaceutical companies, biotech companies, and that sort of thing. And this has now started a big debate over the use of fetal tissue. I find it incredibly hypocritical that there are people who say, oh, I'm pro-choice, but I find that horrible, that's barbaric. If there's nothing wrong with killing the baby, or if you believe it isn't a baby, then what's wrong with this? The other thing is, where does this lead to? Are we going to have a situation where women are going to get pregnant on purpose? Are they going to become basically farms for tissue, for unborn babies? They get pregnant, have a baby, sell that baby for medical research, and have it killed. Again, if there's nothing wrong with abortion, what's wrong with that?
This brochure, produced by the organization Opening Lines, one of the competing companies which sells baby parts, states that, quote, our goal is to offer you and your staff the highest quality, most affordable, and freshest tissue prepared to your specifications and delivered in the quantities you need when you need it. Only the healthiest babies which are referred to as product or used. One look at the opening line's price list should convince anyone that we're not simply dealing with the blob of tissue that pro-abortionists would have us believe are being aborted. For example, anyone can purchase spleens for $75, livers for $150, kidneys for $125, arms and legs for $150. An intact brain goes for $999, the heart and lungs for $150, or spinal cords for $325. And of course, the larger the baby, the more money it generates.
Basically, we found 4 or 5 what we call players in this business that are involved, basically wholesalers, people who buy the dead bodies and then turn around and resell them to pharmaceutical companies and so forth. The 2 main players appeared to be a company called Opening Lines and Anatomic Gift Foundation. Now, the interesting thing is that when we started revealing this information to the public, both of these people ran for the hills. The day that we released the information and it made the first newspaper, one of them shut down that day. The other one hung on for a little bit longer, but then eventually said that they were going to get out of the fetal tissue business as well, which raises several questions. If that's such a noble thing to do, why do you run for the hills just when somebody shines the light on it and says, this is what you're doing? The other thing is, we know that in at least one instance, this company has set up now under another name in another state and is clandestinely back involved in this. But there are other companies, there's several of them that have stayed in it all along.
The harvesting of baby parts has been going on for a long time. I remember when we first found out about it, and we heard that at night they were slipping out these baby parts out of a warehouse so that nobody would be aware that they were doing this. Well, now, of course, it's much more open.
It's a very lucrative trade. After all, if you can sell an intact brain for $1,000, do you want eyeballs? They're $100 a piece. There's a lot of money transplanting here. And a lot of drug companies are doing experiments using these tissues, and the almighty dollar goes there.
By law, a mother must sign a consent form before her baby's parts can be used for research. The Opening Lines brochure instructs abortion clinic counselors on how to best sell a prospective patient on the idea of donating her aborted baby to Opening Lines for resale. It states, quote, "Your patient has the ability to give permission to donate fetal tissue for research. That consent may result in the saving of lives of possibly thousands of people. Great strides are being made with respect to treating and curing many disorders such as cancer, AIDS, Alzheimer's, liver disease, eye disorders and blindness, diabetes, spinal cord injuries, kidney disease, and countless other diseases. When patients think of all the good that could come from this research, the decision becomes quite easy."
The people who are involved in it now are trying to use it as basically kind of a sales tool, a subtle sales tool, to women who may be ambivalent about their abortion decision. If you go in there and you're and as most women are, very ambivalent. This is not something that you wanted to do. No little girl when she's 3 or 4 or 5, 10 years old says one day I want to grow up and have an abortion. No woman wants an abortion. So if you go in there and you're thinking about it, the fact that somebody says to you now, did you know that your baby's body could go to help cure AIDS or cure Parkinson's or whatever? I'm not saying that would push her over to saying, oh, okay, great, then let's go ahead. But it's got to be one of those factors that makes it a little more palatable for her to go forward with the abortion.
A closer look at a number of purchase orders sent to Planned Parenthood requesting fetal tissue indicates that the sacrificed babies are not always used for high purposes. This request for a 12 to 15-week-old liver by the New England Primate Center indicates plans for implantation into a monkey in the hopes of creating a human-monkey chimera or hybrid.
We are seeing experiments, and we're certainly hearing stories of animal-human hybrids. In other words, you're taking some human tissue and planting it in mice or something of that sort. That's Frankenstein type stuff. Because it can be done doesn't mean it should be done. And we have to continue to say, look, the human body is a sacred thing. And we can't simply create monsters. We have to watch scientists.
As evidence of the baby parts trafficking industry began to spread, Congress could no longer ignore the public outcry. On November the 9th, 1999, a resolution was adopted calling for congressional hearings into the matter. While pro-life conservatives applauded the move, pro-abortion liberals busily prepared for battle.
In response to the publicity of selling baby parts, there were hearings in the U.S. Congress. And what came out of it was just a fiasco. We had hoped that that would reveal what was going on. As a matter of fact, the press did not cover it. They're in favor of selling body parts, most of them. And we really didn't get much out of it.
On March the 9th, 2000, the hearings began. What was supposed to blow open the illegal trade in baby parts quickly degenerated into a public ambush of whistleblower Dean Alberti, former tissue procurement technician for the Anatomic Gift Foundation.
Well, the hearing in Congress on the trafficking of baby parts fell apart because the members who had arranged the hearing, who really wanted to get to the bottom of this, did not know that their star witness, Dean Alberti, had been sued by his company. When he went to work for the company, he had signed a confidentiality agreement, and he broke that agreement by revealing all of this damaging information to Mark Crutcher. Under the terms of the agreement, he was under a gag order. He was not supposed to talk about the lawsuit. The other side brought up the lawsuit, and he was terrified. He didn't know if by talking about it in the hearing, he would be in violation and therefore would be subject to being sued again. So the hearing fell apart. His credibility was undermined.
You see, it was necessary to destroy Mr. Alberti's reputation in order to keep the baby parts trafficking industry intact. Since the government is a major participant in the whole operation, both in terms of funding it and in receiving fetal tissue, why would they want it stopped? Once again, congressional hearings were used, not as a search for truth, but as part of a political agenda.
Why do you think our congressmen are not really strong on passing laws to ban this? Well, because many of them are reaping the benefits from the pharmaceutical houses. I mean, they are big supporters of these politicians. And friends, it's all about money. It's all about winning the next election. And we are becoming victimized by such industries as this for political reasons.
We do know that government agencies have been involved, pharmaceutical houses have been involved. Certainly the abortion industry is deeply involved in this.
You know, we Americans are wondering, why would congressmen like Henry Waxman work so hard to destroy Alberti's credibility and prop up this horrendous industry? And I think the answer is that these congressmen receive huge campaign contributions, not only from the pharmaceutical companies, but from the abortion industry itself. And the abortion industry wants to perpetrate the idea that somehow you can benefit humanity by sacrificing your baby.
There's an argument out there that goes like this. Well, these babies are going to be killed in abortion anyway. That's a waste. Why not put some of these organs to use and help mankind? Well, let's flip back 50 years ago. Nazi doctors, trials of Nuremberg, and these doctors justified the experiments that they did on humans, on Jews and others, that this was going to help mankind. They hanged those doctors at Nuremberg.
Despite headlines and claims to the contrary, fetal tissue research has produced very few tangible results. In fact, as University of Toronto neurologist Paul Rinaldi says, A magnifying glass is required to discern any functional benefit. A 52-year-old Parkinsons sufferer received a fetal tissue transplant in his brain and within 2 years died from complications. The fetal tissue, it was discovered, had grown wildly into hair follicles, skin, cartilage, and other debris, causing his death.
In fact, there's not been much, shall we say, scientific progress made. They've been trying to inject brain tissue into patients with Parkinsonism, and almost every year we hear of a new, wonderful cures. Well, you follow those people a year later and they're back to where they were.
Recently, the first full-scale trial of implanting fetal tissue into the brains of Parkinson's sufferers was conducted, and the results were horrendous. While some patients experienced little or no benefit from the treatment, others received permanent side effects far worse than the disease itself, including uncontrollable writhing and twisting, violent head jerking, and unintelligible speech. Some side effects were so severe, patients could no longer eat and required feeding tubes. Doctors involved in the experiment described the results as, quote, absolutely devastating, tragic, catastrophic, and a real nightmare. Nevertheless, they plan to continue using fetal tissue in their search for a cure.
There's a lot of pressure put on this subject today by those celebrities who've got physical problems. And my heart does go out to them, because when you're hurting and when you've got a disease, you're looking for every means possible to try to get help yourself. But we should not even consider using human parts from another little baby.
Why are we ignoring the real progress that has been made in other areas, from taking cord blood from umbilical cords and from taking stem cells from consenting adults and babies who are born where it does no harm? There are many areas of research that are worthwhile and should be supported, but using the parts of aborted babies is not one of them.
We are being told that there are certain experiments that need doing that can only be done with fetal tissue from aborted babies. That's just not true. We can do almost everything with adult tissue. And there is a source of fetal tissue also. Babies die of natural causes. Babies die of miscarriages. There's reasons why you can't use some of those. They aren't normal babies. But there are tubal pregnancies, for instance. Now, those babies die of natural causes, and those tissues can be used.
As a culture, we can't look at this medical research, this fetal tissue research, and tell ourselves that how this tissue is acquired is irrelevant, because it is the most relevant issue. If I'm a scientist and I'm doing some research and somebody brings me a fetal pancreas, the first question I'm going to ask myself is, how did that pancreas come to be dead? Was this baby killed on purpose, or was this baby the result of a spontaneous miscarriage? And the moment we keep ignoring that, we start ignoring that, which is what we're doing now, it's just one more example of how our culture is in collapse.